Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 411. The Earthquake at the Dugu Family. You raised your daughter in that manner. I. Dugu Zonghang am this family's misfortune. I've raised a bunch of evil creatures. You cheated me. And now there's a disaster at our hands because of that. Are you happy? Are you delighted now? Dugu Zonghang jumped up. He looked like a hungry wolf that was circling around in his currently enraged state. He took a round and found nothing to vent his anger on. He then suddenly shouted, "This old man is mad." He jumped and kicked Dugu Wudi ferociously. That kick was extremely powerful. Bang! General Dugu's majestic body broke through the opposite wall and flew into the distance as a result. And it eventually landed inside the great courtyard. In fact, he had fallen flat on the ground. The Dugu and Jun family guards were on standby. So, they quickly turned around in their alertness. The two old men had given serious orders some moments ago: kill anyone who dares to come near in order to eavesdrop on the military secrets. This was no joke. So, they thought that someone had come to eavesdrop when they heard that whooshing sound. However, they then saw that an exceptionally sturdy body had crash-landed between their two groups. This unexpected event shocked everyone present and left their mouths wide open. No one knew what was happening. They suddenly heard another whooshing sound. Then, they saw old man Dugu dash forward and kick General Dugu violently with a twisted mouth and narrowed eyes. He didn't even pay any heed to their presence as he violently kicked and cursed. "Feck you. I feck your mother. Feck you." It seemed that Dugu Wudi had honed himself a long time ago when it came to facing these beatings. And he put his experience to good use at this time. He used his arms to protect his head. And he then curled into a ball-like shape in order to use his head to cover his crotch. However, he continued to shout loudly as he received this beating. "Good. Beat me. Hit me properly. Leave a million bruises. Beat me up fiercely. But I'm also very furious. I'm very furious. Dang it." The two groups of guards stared blankly while remained stationed on either side. However, their eyebrows had shot up violently. They didn't know what was happening. What's happening? Why is the general being beaten up so badly? Forget about the Jun family's guards, even the Dugu family's guards had never seen such a thing. So, this was big news to everyone. And all of them were thoroughly shocked. The guards started looking around at first. Then, they started to gossip. It was then that Jun Xie came rushing. He then shouted loudly, "What are you people doing here? Get lost. Don't you know that this matter is a top secret? I will kill the family of anyone who peers around or divulges any information." What? Even this is a military secret. What nonsense is this? Forget about it. This is a high-level secret between two houses. We small fries shouldn't get involved. Bang! The two sets of guards scattered in different directions. However, Dugu Zonghang still hadn't finished. His fist continued to hammer down like a meteor as he beat and cursed to his heart's content. The more he cursed, the more saliva he spit. But was this beating genuinely that fierce? Dugu Wudi wasn't also someone to be trifled with either. So, he was able to put up with the beating. Jun Xie narrowed his eyes as he looked at the father-son duo. They were both crying themselves hoarse. However, they still looked very energetic. That's enough. That's enough. Listen to me, old Dugu. That's enough. Beating him up isn't going to solve anything. Listen to me. It's okay to curse him, that's justified. But you're taking it too far. You've already beating him senseless. He's your son, damn it. Jun Xie decided to mediate once he felt that they had vented their anger out to a considerable degree. It's not that he didn't wish to intervene earlier. However, he also knew that it was necessary for this father and son duo to give vent to their anger. Otherwise, it was very hard to say what a man of Dugu Zonghang's temper might end up doing. He was trying to mediate the situation. But it seemed like he was adding more fuel to the fire. What happened? Are you trying to break this house? Do you know what it is? A shrill, sharp, and dignified voice echoed in the surroundings. A group of magnificent women had arrived inside the large courtyard. They were led by their lady. Her face was stout, and her figure was graceful. She was Dugu Zonghang's wife. She was the lady of the house. Old Lady Dugu. The wives and concubines of Dugu Wudi were at the rear of that group of women. The members of that elegant party were no less than 7 or 8 in number. And all of them seemed distressed at the sight of Dugu Zonghang beating his son into a pitiful state. But they didn't dare to face old man Dugu's wrath by attempting to mediate between the two. However, they couldn't help but cry in distress. So they could only look towards old Lady Dugu for help. What's going on? Old Lady Dugu struck the ground hard with her walking stick and shouted in anger, "What's the matter here? What is this? Did you beat him into this condition? Don't you know how to control yourself?" Then she glanced sharply at Jun Xie. "Don't speak or mediate. You idiot. You're only making it worse. And your sarcastic tone is even more disgraceful. I will deal with you later." Old Lady Dugu was no less than men in any regard. "You want to know what happened?" Dugu Zonghang looked at his wife as he finally retracted his hand. But he still couldn't help as he gave another kick to his son's posterior. He then continued in anger, "This unfilial brat has made me very angry. Don't stop me today. I won't kill him. But it would be a good thing if I did. And I'll still be at peace even if I do kill him. However, I will break this brat's legs for cheating me even if I don't kill him." The many ladies saw that old man Dugu had finally given rein to his hands at old Lady Dugu's interjection. So they rushed forward like a swarm of bees with tears in their eyes. Then the 7 or 8 of them helped General Dugu to his feet. Dugu Wudi's nose was bloody, his clothes were in tatters, and his face was swollen. Suddenly, there was a loud cry. Then, a beautiful and graceful lady rose into the sky and fell to the ground. "Ah!" she cried out in pain. She had been rendered breathless. She looked astonished, and tears had started to flow down her face. She was completely confused and felt very wronged. This was Dugu Wudi's first wife, and Dugu Xiaoyi's mother. "That's so shameful. What's the matter with you? Have you lost your mind?" Old Lady Dugu hit Dugu Wudi's shoulder with her walking stick in anger. "You beat your own wife to vent your anger? Are you not a man?" Dugu Wudi rose up and cried in anger, "You don't know about this matter, mother. This vile woman birthed and raised such a daughter. And that girl has created a big scandal now. I will kill her. And that will still be an easy punishment. I won't regret it either." The beating General Dugu had received didn't seem to have inhibited his anger. In fact, it seemed that the father should have beaten his son a bit more. Xiao Yi. What's the matter with Xiao Yi? The women suddenly became nervous. The Dugu family only had one treasured daughter. So, everyone cherished her like a gem. And any mention of a daughter obviously referred to Dugu Xiao Yi. General Dugu suddenly found himself surrounded by that group of women. What's the matter? My husband? What happened to Xiao Yi? Hurry up and tell us. Lady Dugu was still in pain. And she was still feeling wronged at being thrown into the air. However, she eagerly crawled to her feet as she asked in a nervous manner, "What happened to Xiao Yi? What happened to my daughter?" Dugu Zhongheng looked up and sighed as General Dugu twisted his mouth and narrowed his eyes. Then, the two men muttered with grief, "Ah! Our family is ruined." Jun Xie scratched his nose, gathered himself, and cupped his hands as he faced old Lady Dugu. He then chuckled for a bit and said, "Ah, my kin by marriage, please accept my greetings." Old Lady Dugu hadn't looked at Jun Xie directly before this. However, she then heard the term, kin by marriage, being spoken. And she nearly lost her breath at the sound of it. She coughed severely as a result. "Jun Xie, you bastard. Your scoundrel grandson, what did he do to my treasured granddaughter?" Old Lady Dugu was a mature and sophisticated lady. So, how could she speak like this? However, she couldn't help herself when she heard old man Jun say, "Kin by marriage." Consequently, those words shot out of her mouth like an arrow from a bow. The power of the words, "kin by marriage," was truly great. The eyes of the 7 or 8 women had suddenly turned into big searchlights as they started to stare at Jun Xie in an imploring manner. Old man Jun's facial expressions wouldn't change if he were to face an army on his own. And he had felt nothing when he had faced the Dugu father and son. But his scalp had started to feel numb in the face of that group of women. In fact, he suddenly went dizzy with admiration for Dugu Wu Di. This Dugu Wu Di is amazing. He manages to deal with so many of such women every day. He's nearly as good as I used to be in those days. Jun Xie coughed and spoke up. "Speak with caution, my kin. My grandson hasn't done something to your granddaughter. Instead, your granddaughter has done something to my grandson. Xiao Yi was the one who boiled the pan and cooked the rice. This is a serious matter. You must understand it properly before you talk about the hows and whys of it." Old Lady Dugu started to sway because she had suddenly thought of many possibilities. However, she quickly regained her composure, and her face got enveloped in a frost-like cold mask. "I have seen the information that has been coming from the southern Heaven City." Lady Dugu cautiously looked at her mother-in-law as the old lady whispered, "I've read every letter of the information which came from the southern Heaven City. But I didn't read a word about Xiao Yi." This was also reasonable from one angle. The 3 Dugu youngsters knew of it. And they were very courageous. However, they couldn't dare to relay this information to their home either. Basically, they were all in on it, and no one wanted to poke the hornet's nest. It was what they called sweeping the bad news under the rug. In fact, the Dugu brothers had already made their contingency plans. "We'll slip away the moment we return home. Perhaps we can hide out in the frontier posts. Then, it won't matter what cacophony this matter creates. After all, it isn't related to us directly." Old man Dugu burst out in anger. "Great! So, the whole family knew that the little girl had gone to the southern Heaven City. And the entire family had concealed this from me. It seems that this old man is the outsider. And all of you are one family. Great! Bullshit, outsider. Stop with your whining. Who would ever tell you about this matter with that beastly temper of yours? Wouldn't we obviously have to hide this from you? Old Lady Dugu spoke up in a harsh manner. Then she returned to the matter at hand. Hurry and tell me the entire story from the very beginning. I want to know how I'm akin by marriage with this old man Jun. Old man Dugu was shaking with anger. But he was still helpless against his wife. He had always been powerless to lash out, even when he had wanted to. And that was because the enemy had always been too overbearing. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 412. The two military families join hands. The father and son duo stopped when they heard the old lady Dugu's question. However, they didn't reply. You tell me. Old Lady Dugu pointed her finger towards Dugu Wudi and asked. However, Dugu Wudi still didn't speak up. He merely trembled in anger as he thought about the matter. He was gasping with difficulty while attempting to suppress the rage in his heart. It could be said. The man told her that the little devil of a girl had lost her mind and had made her guards bring her 100 grams of aphrodisiac. She had then tricked Jun Moxie into consuming the whole packet. Wouldn't this have been enough for old Lady Dugu to guess what had happened afterwards? Dugu Wudi hadn't even finished speaking, but she had already started to sway. Then, her walking stick fell from her hand and fell on the ground with a bang. And the old lady was now on the verge of collapsing. Dugu Wudi and his wife rushed forward to catch her. And they called out to her repeatedly as they did so. It's a sin. Old Lady Dugu got a hold of herself before she opened her mouth and cried out. She didn't doubt this news one bit. She knew Dugu Xiaoyi's personality very well, and she also knew about her feelings for Jun Moxie. So, she knew that it was entirely possible. Moreover, would someone like Jun Xie lie about such things? And, particularly on the eve of the army's return at that. How long could the old man Jun maintain such an irrefutable lie even if he were to lose his self-respect and lie? Wouldn't he be ridiculed by the world if he were to do something like that? Moreover, Dugu Xiaoyi had always had a favorable impression of the debauchee young master of the Jun family. And this matter was no secret for the Dugu family. However, the main problem still hadn't been dealt with. So, General Dugu braced himself and finished narrating the second part of the story. The details had been light until now. And the important stuff was still to come. And that part was regarding Guan Qinghan. The expressions of all the women present on the scene became heavy as they heard about it. What are you planning to do? Old Lady Dugu looked like she had drowned as she looked at Dugu Zonghang and Dugu Wudi. What can we do? I don't agree with any of this. That Jun Moxie is a debauchee and spoilt child. In fact, he's someone who looks for prostitutes in broad daylight. He doesn't do honest work. The brat is a true wastrel. How can Xiaoyi marry such a brat? 30 generations of our family will feel wronged if that happens. Dugu Wudi spoke up in anger. I will castrate that boy the moment he gets back. I'll do it. Your mother's fart. This thing has already happened. Can Xiaoyi ever marry someone else now? Old Lady Dugu was mad and gloomy. And you still want to castrate him? You idiot. Are you that stupid? How dare you even think of this? You want to castrate him? Hee hee. I will give General Dugu this authority. But will he dare to do it? Jun Xie spoke up while tilting his head. The old man held out his hands and snorted. This old man's grandson has always been courteous and considerate. He's refined and gentle. He's talented. And his genius touches the sky. How could you even say something like that about him? I don't know if it's you or that girl Xiao Yi who is blind. You still have the nerve to speak those words. Jun Xie. Old Lady Dugu gave a hateful look to old man Jun. Do you not feel ashamed while speaking such words about your grandson? What would a little girl understand? A few sweet lines would have been enough to fool her. Oh my dear kin. Ask your conscience when you speak those words. That brat Mo Xie had never taken the initiative for Dugu Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi was the one who had taken the initiatives for Mo Xie. And everyone knows this. Am I right? Moreover, I had heard a certain someone say something very particular at the beginning of the auction at the aristocratic hall. I will repay with my daughter if I don't have the money. I can always pay my debt by making her your wife. Old man Jun leisurely spoke this as he brought up the old debts. Old Lady Dugu shifted her glare to Dugu Wu Di and asked, "Did you say this? You beast?" General Dugu had been thoroughly stunned by this. However, he tried to deny in the face his mother's overbearing presence. That brat had run amok. I had spoken it without thinking, no one would have taken it seriously. Bah! Who won't take it seriously? Didn't you feel any shame in speaking those words? Old Lady Dugu was at a complete loss for words. However, Jun Xie saw the chance and pressed for an advantage. Oh my dear kin. A real man doesn't fight with a woman. I haven't come to you to fight. We need to act at this time. And the biggest problem we have at hand is, that those two have lit the fire and committed the unmendable act. And I have come here to seek your opinion on that matter. Old man Jun sneered and quickly changed the subject. It's unpleasant to hear it. But our Jun family isn't necessarily seeking your daughter if your Dugu family insists on not marrying her off to us. In clearer words, we're not dying to take her if you're not willing to marry her off to us. Would Mo Xie still use the aphrodisiac on your daughter if he had commitments? Youngsters as talented as my grandson are rare. But there is no shortage of suitable women. The Imperial Princess Ling Meng visits our home every day these days. Your Dugu family isn't the only one which has a daughter in the capital. Wouldn't becoming the relatives of the imperial family be better than marrying my grandson to your Xiao Yi? Plus, Qing Han is already perfect for the position of his wife. Moreover, she has also committed the same sin. Jun Xie had spoken this in a very confident manner. Dugu Wu Di had been very rude when he had talked about castration. And Jun Xie's approach was different, that cursing in a direct manner. But the effect was the same. I'm here to ask you about what you plan to do in this matter. And I have a second purpose as well. Your granddaughter's actions have also involved Mo Xie and Qing Han. Our family has revoked Qing Han's relations to us as a daughter-in-law, and she has been taken in as Wu Yi's adopted daughter instead. But only a few people know about this. So, she is still our eldest daughter-in-law in the eyes of most outsiders. We can't officially hide this matter. So, we must solve it. This matter involves an elder sister-in-law. So, it is a huge scandal. Therefore, your Dugu family must give me a statement over this incident, even if you won't marry off Xiao Yi to our family. And there's a third matter as well. We don't have a problem if your Dugu family doesn't wish to get involved with us. However, you can still help us out with some money. I don't mind if you use a little money to resolve this matter. So, quickly hand over the money you owe me. Don't delay it too much further. Jun Xie had spoken those words anxiously, quickly, and clearly. And the men and women of the Dugu family were stunned by listening to them. Jun Xi's words had seemed unpleasant, but it had some essence to it. They had only been concerned about Dugu Xiao till now. So, they had forgotten about Jun Moxie and Guan Qinghan's relationship. And this was a very important factor. After all, Dugu Xiao had committed the sin herself. But the young Master Jun and Guan Qinghan were the victims. The Dugu family wouldn't be able to stay away from this matter if it came to light. After all, this matter had been caused by Dugu Xiao. So, all levels of society would attack them. After all, it was a matter that involved one's sister-in-law. In fact, even the people who knew that this wasn't Dugu Xiao's fault in its entirety wouldn't mention this part in a decent light of affairs. Not many people had the guts to provoke two powerful military families if they stood together. However, the Jun family could tell everyone that Dugu Xiao had caused this matter if they were put under the scanner. Therefore, people would come to learn that a young lady had done the unmendable deed with a young master even though they weren't married. And this would become a huge joke and a huge scandal. Moreover, Dugu Xiao had mixed in the aphrodisiac, and that had given rise to this situation in the first place. Only extremely wily hoodlums or escorts adopted such methods. Old Lady Dugu called out in anger as she thought of this. Why did a bodyguard of our family have such an aphrodisiac with him? They are loyal men, and they were selected from the best before they were sent to the southern heaven city. Moreover, they were supposed to guard our family's women. So, why did they have the aphrodisiac? What were they thinking? Dugu Zonghang and Dugu Wudi shuddered coldly as they listened to this. Their expressions became very solemn and unsightly. Dugu Wudi's eagle-like vision went over the 7 concubines one at a time. His gaze was cold and dense, like a knife. Ahem, the aphrodisiac which that girl used was male-specific, ahem, she then emptied the whole packet. I've heard that the said guard's health was somewhat defective, ahem, not very good. Jun Xie felt somewhat awkward. And had no choice but to give that explanation. A very bloody event might have occurred if he hadn't given that explanation. So, that's what it is. That giant bear-like man's eyes became soft again. The women also became relieved. Each had been very nervous. And that was visible since their foreheads were full of sweat at this time. None of them could ever look up again if they were to get stained with such a bad reputation. In fact, even mere suspicion would feel very shameful for them. This matter hadn't raised great waves yet. But Jun Xi's words had created an extremely frightening picture. Old Lady Dugu and Dugu Zonghang hunched down when they heard Jun Xi's 3 conditions. Old man Dugu started to grieve over the matter at first. Then, he became filled with violent rage. So, he grabbed Dugu Wudi and started to beat him up again. Dang you! You lowlife bastard! You pulled one over this old man and got me into a debt of millions. But your daughter is even better. She has created such a huge scene. I will kill you. I will kill you. You bastard. Stop. Jun Xie shouted loudly. You bastard needn't put on a performance in front of me again. You've already spoken to your heart's content. Now, what will you do about this matter? I am already preparing countermeasures regarding this event. Wu Yi had kept a tight lid over this matter at the Southern Heaven City. But I reckon that every family has already received the news. In fact, I'm certain that even His Majesty has heard about it. I'm also in a terrible shape at this time. But you father and son are still wrangling about it. Don't you know that time is worth gold right now? Do you think that this is the time to create this drama? We might as well postpone this matter about marriage. But the matter at hand, we have never worked together before. But we have to make an exception for this case. And we need to work together for now. Your Jun family's reputation mustn't fall. And our Xiao Yi's much praised virtue mustn't be tarnished. Old Lady Dugu promptly made the final decision. Her virtue. It is worth a fart now. Dugu Zongheng's chest heaved in anger. She acted herself. And administered that drug to a man. How can we still speak of her virtue? He then raised his carrot-thick finger at Dugu Wu Di and his daughter-in-law. And started to admonish them again. You raised your daughter like this. You taught her all this. She has disgraced our family now. A young girl from a big family has caused such a big scandal. You've made this old man very mad. Dugu Wu Di and his wife lowered their heads and listened to the curses. However, everyone was thinking the same thing in their hearts. Wasn't it you who'd pamper her? You would get furious if we ever spoke to her in a loud voice. Therefore, she got used to living without any sense of responsibility. And this happened because she wasn't disciplined. You bear 90% of the blame in reality. However, they could only think along these lines. Who would dare to speak this out aloud? Wouldn't that be asking for death? We must be prepared in that case. It is important to know that the imperial censors can cause a person's death by their verdict in a matter like this one. Moreover, any attempts to give an explanation would be useless. So, we must have a proper understanding. We must act and resolve this matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, inconceivably horrible things will await us in the future. Old man Jun had sounded very serious when he had spoken this. However, he was actually very relieved inside. I finally tricked this annoying family to join our side. That wasn't easy. But victory is within reach since they are on our side. We will be the most powerful force in this world if our two military families joining hands. How would the rotten scholars dare to mess with us if we stand together? You old Jun dog. You're right about this. We must first work together to get over this difficulty. As for the matter regarding marriage, we must consider it properly, and slowly, very slowly. Old Lady Dugu was speaking this when she suddenly changed her mind halfway. She then said, "Consider it slowly." No. That won't do. This marriage's matter must be settled as soon as possible as well. In fact, you should be worried if you aren't already. What if that little girl became pregnant due to this? What would we do if that happens? That's not possible, right? There isn't any chance of that, right? Dugu Zongheng and Dugu Wu Di looked at each other in dismay as they scratched their heads. Dugu Wu Di even opened his huge mouth and spoke up. Think over it properly, mother. It won't happen in one attempt. Wouldn't this old man Jun be dancing if his boy was that potent? Moreover, Xiao Yi is still very young. And 16 years of age is too early. You two are pigheads. Old Lady Dugu looked at them with resentment and cursed. Do you believe that a boy and girl will stay idle throughout the journey once they've got a taste for it? And they'll only be here after 2 months of that shameful deed happening on the journey. We need to be careful. I'll see what you two bastards have to say if that happens. Moreover, we also have to look at the other aspect about the Jun family. That Jun Moxie's reputation was in tatters for a few years. But haven't we heard he is changing things of late? Then, They're also graced by that outsider who is a world-conquering expert. So, this match may not sound that big of a disgrace to Xiao Yi's name. Old Lady Dugu's face was very anxious as she finished speaking. The eyes of the several ladies suddenly showed a trace of embarrassment as they heard this. And their complexion turned deathly pale. This assumption was rather possible if one thought about it. Dang, the Dugu father and son exclaimed in unison at first. And they were left dumbfounded thereafter. Jun Xi's eyes assumed a happier expression as he continued to hear what they had to say. He snorted. It seems that things aren't turning out that bad after all. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 413. Xiao Han's Madness. There was an inconspicuous little town some distance from the southern Heaven City. It was called Ivory Town. The town had only a few hundred households in it. However, there was a lot of hustle and bustle in the tea house outside the town. This was because a group of white-clothed people were sitting in a circle and were looking southwards from time to time. They were many in number. And all of them were wearing snow-white clothes. Without exception. They were bustling about a little, but their faces were ice-cold. In fact, their ice-cold faces and snow-white clothes were enough to freeze the people around them. Even the tea house's servers didn't dare approach them after they greeted them the first time. They had understood that this group shouldn't disturb them. Moreover, even the air they exhaled seemed to be very cold. So, no one wanted to provoke them. These men were the spirit Xian experts from the Silver Blizzard City, the Seven Swords and the Six Elders. The Sky Xian Xiao Han and Mu Shui Tong were also there. Han Yan Meng and Xiao Fengwu were present as well. It could be said that these people from the Silver Blizzard City were extremely gloomy from the backdrop of their journey from the Southern Heaven City. The Jun family's Jun Wu Yi was supposed to have died. In fact, he shouldn't have had any chance of survival. But his situation had unexpectedly taken a turn for the worst in their perspective. He had returned safe and sound. Moreover, his situation had improved considerably. In fact, the Silver Blizzard City couldn't dare to regard him lightly anymore. Their main aim had been to deal with the solitary falcon. However, they hadn't gotten any chance to do it over the course of their stay there. And then, that heaven-shaking powerful and mysterious black-clothed person had also appeared. His strength was such that even the Seven Swords and Six Elders felt terrified of him. They had feared this mysterious man would try to look for them for the troubles they had caused the Jun family. So, they didn't even wait for the matter to finish, and had set out from the Southern Heaven City. They were preparing to pass through Tianxiang on their return journey to the Silver City. They had already sent a report of everything that had happened in the Southern Heaven City to the Silver City via an eagle. The upper echelons of the Silver Blizzard City had sniffed a lot of danger upon hearing that extraordinary news. One could only imagine the mysterious black-clothed man's strength when he had managed to kill someone like Li Ju Tian with such ease. The Xiao family's great elder Xiao Xingyun and the lord of the Silver Blizzard City had given the command. All men who had gone to the Southern Heaven City were to withdraw without any delay. The other forces of the city were also to return. Their strength would be consolidated, and preparations for any eventualities would be made. The severity of that command was even greater than that time when the Silver Blizzard City had faced the Dongfang family. The former had been at a disadvantage. However, the Silver Blizzard City had been confident that they could reverse the situation. So much so that they hadn't even dispatched their high-level troops. None of them had given any importance to the Dongfang assassins even though they had wreaked havoc across the world. However, this situation was completely different. The strength of that mysterious man was too high for the Dongfang family to even compare, especially since he wasn't confronting the whole world at once. Therefore, the other cities, families, and powerful entities would merely watch from safety in case he decided to deal with the Silver Blizzard City. In fact, it was next to concluded that no one would come to the aid of the Silver Blizzard City in such an event. Therefore, this order had been extremely urgent. And one could see it from the Silver Blizzard City's shock, nervousness, and even panic. Xiao Han had nearly lost his mind over the course of this journey. His eyes had become red. His spirit had also gone insane. Moreover, the number of innocent people who had died at his hands over the course of this journey numbered no less than 10. In fact, it seemed that they wouldn't be able to reach the Silver City before the time he would go completely insane if things continued like that. Such an insignificant man has robbed my fiancée. I have been superior to this insignificant creature all these past years. He may be heroic. His character may be lofty and unyielding. But I still possess strength which far surpasses his. Even my backing is more than 8 to 10 times stronger than his. I can even insult him as I like. I can play around with him. And I can even wreak havoc over him. I Xiao Han am at Sky Xian expert. And what are you, Jun Xie? Xiao Han had been taking pleasure in the mistreatments he had dealt to Jun Xie for all those years. You want to rob my wife? I will ruin your family. I'll destroy your descendants. And I'll make you the shame of this mortal world. But I won't let you die even then. I will insult you bit by bit till you die. However, the man he could have insulted as he wished, the man he could play around with in his deformity, had suddenly turned into someone whom he couldn't even dare to provoke. Everything has changed because of that mysterious man. That mysterious man has changed everything. It was a drastic change. It was almost as if he was a creature that was high up in the heavens and was looking down on all creation. However, he had suddenly fallen from the sky, and had crossed the 18 levels of hell to end up in its lowest dungeon. And such a change was something which a petty person like Xiao Han couldn't endure. Moreover, he had the 13 elders with him. All of them were at Spirit Xian. They were peak experts. Their comprehensive strength was enough to trample the entire continent. But even such an unreasonably strong force was suddenly cowering in front of the might of that mysterious person. In fact, they weren't even thinking of taking the initiative, and didn't even dare to stand out. And Xiao Han had gone crazy as a result. Perhaps it could be said that he had no other thoughts except for the ones that were crumbling his mind down to insanity. The leader of the contingent from the Silver Blizzard City, Xiao Buyu, was helpless at Xiao Han's descent into insanity. He had to postpone the journey further at the lack of any better option. This matter had stirred up a lot for trouble for the second Xiao elder. In fact, he had lost his honor. He hadn't been so disgraced even when he had to face the might of the old lady of the Dongfang family. Moreover, he knew what Xiao Han was thinking about, what he hoped for. However, he couldn't dare to act on his grandson's desires. He felt somewhat guilty for Xiao Han. However, Xiao Buyu would become very ashamed if his grandson were to become a living madman. Therefore, he put a stop to their travels so that they could rest. What is Jun Xie? He is a trash who takes help from others and their talents. How can he ever compare and compete with me? I am nobler than he is. I'm more outstanding than he is. I ought to be trampling over him my entire life. Also, I ought to be ruining him, and playing around with him all I wish. He'll be an insignificant cripple forever. Xiao Han continued to chatter and shout those words as he went mad. Nobody responded to him. That was because everyone knew that he was fundamentally speaking nonsense. Who is Jun Xie? He is the great blood general. He rules freely over the battleground and has never been defeated. The man has already achieved so much at such a young age. No one knows how brilliant he would have become if it weren't for the unreasonable intervention of the Xiao family's elders. However, he didn't give up growing even after 10 years of being a cripple. Jun Xie is at the Sky Xian's middle rank now. What kind of unwavering determination does he have? What kind of willpower does he possess? But, what are you, Xiao Han? You were offered the best services and training at the Xiao family. You had the best training environment and innumerable rare medicines. But, you're still at the first level of the Sky Xian realm. And yet, you think about questioning someone else's worth? I've decided. Jun Xie and I will have a decisive battle. To decide who gets the bride. Xiao Han didn't seem to have realized the senselessness of his words. Moreover, his eyes became red, and his body shuddered as he looked directly at Xiao Buyu. These words seemed to have come from the bottom of his heart. His coarse and gloomy voice resembled a smashed gong. Perhaps this was something only Xiao Han could have come up with. It doesn't matter if I live or die. I must go and fight with him. I can't live in the same world as Jun Xie. Xiao Han's forefinger trembled as he pointed with it. His hair was disheveled. His complexion was pale. And his eyes were full of madness. I will go alone if you don't agree. I will die here if I don't go. I've decided that I won't return to the Silver City like this. I'm too ashamed to return like this. Xiao Han looked extremely sad and regretful at that moment. Han Yanmeng didn't harbor a good impression of him. However, even she felt pity for the man. The man had been robbed of his fiancée. Even if his fiancée didn't feel a thing for him, it would have been one matter if they had voluntarily renounced their engagement. However, someone stealing his cherished fiancée was another matter altogether. Xiao Buyu looked on profoundly. Then, he looked at the other elders. And, all of them nodded slowly. Xiao Han's decision was difficult to walk away from. All of them were part of society. And, all of them had the blood of men flowing within them. How could they not understand? They couldn't dare to destroy the Jun family. But, Xiao Han was still a victim in their eyes. So, his desire to fight the man who had stolen his spouse was quite understandable. He robbed my wife. These words were always a taboo around Xiao Han. No one in the Silver City dared to mention these words around him, including the Xiao family's elders. However, Xiao Han had spoken these words himself at this time. So, it was clear what situation he was in. Xiao Han would probably suffer from extreme grief, and would lose his mind forever if his request wasn't fulfilled. Therefore, these men from the Silver Blizzard City had decided to wait at that place for the arrival of Jun Xie's army. They would challenge him once he had arrived. And they knew that the proud Jun Xie would never refuse such a challenge even if he had some disadvantage. Xiao Han would put an end to his disgrace and insult his opponent to give full vent to his feelings. However, everything would be fine as long as he didn't take Jun Xie's life. Their speed was quite fast. So, the men from the Silver City had arrived much earlier. And they had been waiting for 4 days since Jun Xie's army hadn't arrived yet. However, it was their misfortune that their wait wouldn't only see the arrival of Jun Xie and his army. There were others as well who were traveling on this road. The sun set as another day passed. Everyone from the Silver City prepared to eat dinner. They had already converted that tea house into a restaurant. The elders of the Silver City looked like cold and bad people. But they were extremely wealthy and paid the patron of the tea house very handsomely. In fact, the money was equivalent to the amount the said patron would take home after a full year's harvest. Therefore, the man wasn't disgusted. In fact, he was thankful to the god of wealth. He also ensured that no one would disturb the men from the Silver City. He was very happy and had grown very fond of them. Then, they suddenly heard a great clatter of hooves arise. It wasn't too fast, nor was it too slow. It was coming from the direction of the southern heaven city. It was two women. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 414. Peerless Magnificence. Everyone from the Silver Blizzard City glanced around. And they were stunned by what they saw. Especially Xiao Fengwu, his eyes sparkled with an exceptional fire. The 6 elders and the 7 swords were much older than him, but even they couldn't help having such an amazed look on their faces. Even the somewhat crazed Xiao Han's expression had suddenly become a little mild. The 2 horses galloping forth were being ridden by a white-clothed and a green-clothed girl respectively. The green-clothed girl's appearance was difficult to discern. They could see that the girl's posture was graceful. But her face was dark. So, it was difficult to make it out. But it seemed pretty nonetheless. Her eyes were mischievous like the lakes in autumn. Her general appearance made her seem more like a little girl. She was full of inquisitiveness and was covered with innocence. She seemed pure and extremely adorable. Her face was difficult to judge. However, everyone had already overlooked that aspect. Then, they looked behind her and saw that white-clothed girl. And the men genuinely forgot their manners and surroundings in that moment. The clothes covering her body were as white as snow. Her hair was as black as a rain cloud. The young woman's facial features were normal. But anyone who'd look at her face would discover that any man facing her magnificent beauty wouldn't have the courage to look at her. They thought that she was very pure. Even the most beautiful of women would feel inferior when facing that white-clothed young woman. She resembled a shining moon in the night sky. Her cold radiance shone over the world. However, no one could reach her. She was too high to reach. And yet, she was graceful as she floated above the mortal world like a fairy from the 9th heaven. Her figure was delicate like a beautiful flower. They found her very beautiful. In fact, she looked so beautiful that they couldn't even fathom how someone could look so beautiful. It could be said that even the most beautiful rhetoric that could be used to describe a woman would sound pale if it were used to describe this peerless beauty. It seemed as if no words could describe the beauty of that woman. Only the heavens could describe something so beautiful. The creatures of this mortal world would fall short of this task. Her appearance was devilishly magnificent. Would it be enough to say that her beauty could bring about the downfall of an empire? Would it be enough to regard her beauty as devastating? Cities, countries, or even the entire continent would readily turn over for this woman's beauty. And everyone thought of this same idea when they laid eyes on her. Her body seemed to be enveloped in a mysterious cotton-like mist. In fact, it seemed like the vapor that originates from a tobacco pipe. This seemed to be making her appearance blurry, but somewhat clear at the same time. In fact, she was like a rising moon, incomparably clear, yet equally unclear at the same time. Everyone had the same thought when they laid eyes on her. Dang! Such a beautiful woman actually lives in this land. The unique, divine, and peerlessly magnificent beauty had seemingly stopped the setting sun in its tracks the moment she had appeared on the road. In fact, it seemed that the rarity of this white-clothed woman's beauty had compelled the sun to cease its downward motion so that it could allow this woman to shine under a million rays of its light. However, the splendid sunlight lost its splendor the moment she dismounted. Instead, the very ground beneath her feet started to radiate with an immortal-like aura. However, no one from the Silver Blizzard City had realized that a strange light had flashed in the eyes of the green and the white-clothed women. Moreover, this strange light had vanished very quickly. Elder sister, this hurried journey has made me very tired. We might as well stop here and have tea before we continue on with our journey. How does that idea sound? The green-clad girl's voice was like a songbird, sharp and sweet. You're right, younger sister. There's no need for haste. We can rest here for some time before we proceed further on our journey. They're behind us in any case. The white-clothed woman smiled after she had said that. However, the people from the Silver City thought that flowers were blooming before them. No. It didn't seem like this flower was in full bloom at this time. However, that smile could still bring about the downfall of an empire. But, there are so many people here. I don't know if the patron can provide 2 more seats. Moreover, could this countryside tea shop be any good? The white-clothed woman frowned with some anxiety. The 2 ladies. I asked the girls to please sit here, this youngster ahem. Ahem. I can stand for some time, that's not a problem. Here, please have some snow tea. The quality is great. It might not be worthy of the 2 young ladies. But, I ask you to accept it since this place is very remote. Xiao Fengwu looked at the white-clothed girl. His eyes were already brimming with infatuation. His face was fervent as he hastily stood up. He then eagerly offered her the Silver Blizzard City's special, snow tea. After that, he politely brushed his seat with his sleeve. He had even forgotten the somewhat irascible Han Yen Meng's presence as he said, "Your legs must be tired after such a long journey, right? Come and sit. We'll stand. You must rest your legs." Han Yen Meng pouted the moment these words escaped Xiao Fengwu's mouth. In fact, her facial expressions were illustrating her displeasure very clearly. What did this guy say? The Silver City's snow tea is the best in the world. But, this isn't good enough for these women. Then, I don't know which tea is. Plus, this guy's attitude is utterly disgraceful. He doesn't seem to carry himself as a man from the Silver City's younger generation. He genuinely isn't living up to his status. In fact, Xiao Fengwu should call me aunt if we observe the strict hierarchy. But, the elders said that I'm too young for that. And, that has made my generational status drop. Shouldn't I call my elder sister aunt by this logic? What logic is this? Han Yen Meng had later realized that the drop of her generational standing hadn't been an accident. In fact, she had found that some people had done it on purpose. This was done in order to get me married. There's no doubt that I'm very young since the others of my generation are 30 to 40 years elder to me. However, there are many men of my age in the generation that comes under mine. But, they're obviously separated by generational hierarchy. And, human relations are irreversible. Moreover, the Silver City Xiao family won't wish to get related by marriage to an outsider. So, this strict fall of my generational status has happened in order to avoid any unnecessary trouble. And, Xiao Fengwu's presence has only highlighted this issue since the 2 families had unanimously decided to appoint him as my husband. He's my age for sure, but he's not mature enough yet. Moreover, they must be afraid that I could repeat my elder sister's case. But, this Xiao Fengwu will become my husband if everything goes smoothly. This is such a silly thing. In fact, it's akin to purposeful self-delusion. But no man in the Silver City will speak against it. This is because there would be a huge power struggle inside the Silver Blizzard City if anyone from outside becomes my husband. That may not be a problem today. However, my children will have to face the brunt of it. Han Yenmeng didn't have a good impression of her betrothed, to be honest. But she didn't have a bad one either. In fact, she was confused about it. But she noticed that Xiao Fengwu was being particularly attentive towards an attractive girl he had barely met. She found it laughable, but she also felt somewhat uneasy. Then, he unexpectedly offered his seat to her. And this was very contrary to how polite he usually was. This made the little girl look fearful since she felt that she may have to give up her seat for those women as well. None of the Xiao elders have said anything in this matter. This is the reality of these men. How could this unexpected event not leave the little girl to feel extremely wronged? She tilted her head downwards and pretended that she hadn't heard anything. It's your choice if you wish to be lowly and violate norms. But you're pulling me down with you. Who do you think you are? Who are you? Little sister, please vacate your seat. Xiao Fengwu glanced at Han Yenmeng. Then, he looked at the white-clothed woman with a fearful look in his eyes. It seemed that he was worried that she would get angry. Therefore, he had shouted out his request. How can you talk like that to the little princess, Fengwu? Mu Shuatong glared since he couldn't stand this any longer. His voice was also full of anger. However, many of the Silver City's elders found his rebuke misplaced. One look at Xiao Fengwu made it obvious that the first grandson of the Xiao family had fallen in love with the white-clothed woman at first sight. Han Yenmeng was very unhappy about this matter. She had always been the most favored and adored young woman. She had always been doted on by her elders. However, not one of those men had opened their mouths in her support at this juncture. She wrinkled her nose and stamped her feet. Then, she stood up angrily and said, Xiao Fengwu, you've turned out to be a great man indeed. I've finally come to know you today. Then, she ran to Mu Shuatong's side in anger. She leaned against him in grievance, and couldn't help her tears from falling down. Please sit. Young ladies, rest peacefully, you've been neglected. Please, let me serve you your tea. It seemed that Xiao Fengwu hadn't even noticed Han Yenmeng. He quickly moved his limbs and dusted the seat that had been vacated by Han Yenmeng as well. The young man's face was full of eagerness. Ah, that's so nice. Thank you, young master. A thin and imperceptible trace of contempt flashed in the green-clothed girl's eyes. Then, the two women walked over in an elegant manner. Their perfume assailed everyone's nostrils as the two women walked past them. And the men were left with a very satisfactory sensation as a result. The white-clothed woman didn't say a word from the beginning. Nor did she show any peculiar expression. You're welcome, you're welcome. May this Xiao Fengwu dare to ask the young ladies proper names? Xiao Fengwu cupped his hands. His face showed how honored he felt. In fact, it seemed like his spirit had already left his body. The girl in green quickly shifted her gaze and replied, My elder sister's name is Mei, my name is also Mei. Mei? Your family name is Mei. It's like the beautifully blossoming plum after a cold winter. It's so noble, lofty, and aloof. Xiao Fengwu's face was full of admiration. But he continued to stammer for a long time, without coming to a stop. It seemed as if he didn't even know what to say. Mei? The Silver City's 7 swords and 6 elders trembled. That name wasn't anything on its own. But These people were returning from the southern heaven city. So, they couldn't help but recall the unreasonable strength of Venerable Mei, the Lord of Tianfa. In fact, they still had some lingering fear when it came to the name Mei. May I ask where the young lady's homeland is? This old man has walked everywhere under the sky, but I've never come across such a rare and talented beauty such as yourself. Perhaps the young miss is an old friend I don't know about, he. Xiao Buyu smoothed his beard and chuckled as his eyes flashed. We're sisters of a business house from Tianxiang. The white-clothed girl was still silent. She looked at that high-quality tea from Silver City. But she didn't move even a bit. So, it was the green-clothed girl who had replied this time as well. Two single women traveling on the road alone, you must be very brave and talented. Xiao Buyu became increasingly suspicious as he continued to look at them. Those two didn't seem to have any Xian efficacy to them. However, he was only a step behind the strength of the great masters. So, he was a top-class expert in his own merit. And he could sense that his heart was feeling constricted for no apparent reason. What kind of strength would these two possess if they can conceal their cultivation from me? Is it possible that? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 415. My toilet is known as the Silver Blizzard City. We're alone on this road, and we have guards, ha ha ha. But they don't appear in front of others, ah. These words had apparently been spoken by the green-clothed young girl in a slip-of-tongue moment. She then quickly covered her mouth. Her eyes had turned round, and she turned away in panic. She then gave a hollow laugh. She genuinely seemed to be panicking in this moment. Xiao Buyu thought to himself, it seems that I was overthinking things. The situation has been very turbulent of late. So, we've started to panic at the first sign of a shadow. In fact, we treat every tree like an enemy soldier. These two girls don't have any signs of Xian Qi fluctuations on their bodies. However, it's very likely that they aren't big experts. In fact, everything should be fine as long as they haven't been traveling from the southern heaven city. He had been terrified until a moment ago. In fact, he had believed that things could turn out very badly if the white-clothed girl even had any far-off relations to Venerable Mei. However, it certainly didn't seem to be the case anymore. Moreover, it was a good thing since that wasn't the case. That girl has caught Feng Wu's eye. And, could any girl in this world resist the lure of the Silver Blizzard City? It's very common for real men to have 3 or 4 wives and concubines. In fact, it wouldn't be a big deal if Feng Wu took many wives, as long as the little princess is his first wife. Xiao Buyu gave Xiao Han a meaningful look. Xiao Han still looked as crazy as before. His spirit had been subdued. And he genuinely wanted to fight a decisive battle with Jun Yi. But his tiredness from the journey of the past few days hadn't subsided yet. Let Xiao Han feign madness and play the fool. That should yield a good result in this situation. Moreover, I can save this situation in case. After all, Xiao Feng Wu is also my blood. He's my great-grandson. This girl looks very talented. And she very beautiful as well. So, it's okay if this girl's family isn't that influential. In fact, it's fine even if they are no match for ours. His judgment had been very accurate. That white-clothed girl and Venerable Mei weren't related. This was absolutely true. But what he hadn't thought of was, you look like you've taken a fancy for the white-clothed girl, Feng Wu. Xiao Han had taken the hint. So, he raised his head and tilted it as he looked at his nephew. In fact, he deliberately made himself look like an insane person. Ah. I. Xiao Fengwu was left helpless. He stole a stealthy glance from the corner of his eyes and shot a quick look at the white-clothed woman before he began to stammer. Uncle. Uncle. I'm only asking you whether it's true or not. Do you think that this girl is beautiful? Do you want to take her home as your wife? Xiao Han looked drunk as he slammed his hands on the table. Then, he opened his eyes wide. His indication was evident. Your uncle will play the bad guy for your sake if you've taken a fancy to her. The green-clothed girl rolled her eyes. You wish to take my elder sister as your wife? You must something very highly of yourself. Yes, but Xiao Fengwu had always been bossy. But he became embarrassed when he heard of that matter. In fact, his cheek had become flaccid. It's okay. Your uncle will do it for you. Xiao Han turned to look at the white-clothed woman. Then, looked her up and down and said, May I dare to ask the young lady if she has ever heard of the Silver Blizzard City? One must make the heavens mad before the heavens would exterminate them. But, what if the person is already mad? It's fine if the heavens make one commit a sin. However, one mustn't commit a sin on their own initiative. Mu Shuatong kept his eyes on the white-clothed woman as Xiao Han took on his insane form and spoke those words. The lady's beauty had been embedded in his heart. And everyone loves beauty. So, Mu Shuatong felt a somewhat protective feeling towards her. Therefore, he didn't wish for such a beautiful woman to be defiled by that Xiao uncle-nephew duo. However, I can't act for that young lady's benefit by drawing weapons without explanation. Anyone can see that it's that Xiao Buyu who is controlling everything from behind. So, what would I be able to achieve if I were to do something at this time? However, Mu Shuatong had also noticed something unexpected. It was strange that he couldn't see her appearance very clearly at such a close distance despite his cultivation level. But that woman had a very real feeling to her. She wasn't hiding her appearance either. Nor was she wearing a veil or something. Moreover, she seemed as fearless as an emperor in front of his people. However, no one could make out her appearance properly. What's going on here? What does this feeling signify? And what puzzled Mu Shuatong the most was the fact that any woman would be distressed or embarrassed once she would hear what Xiao Han and Xiao Fengwu were speaking about. More so because their words were directed at that white-clothed woman herself. However, the said woman's expression hadn't changed from the very beginning. She had managed to remain coldly indifferent and very calm. In fact, it had seemed as if she hadn't even heard them. The young lady then held her teacup and took a sip from it. In fact, it seemed as if she only had eyes for the tea in her cup. Even a shabby teacup looked like a golden imperial gauntlet when held in her hands. She hadn't seemed to have heard what Xiao Han had asked her. In fact, she didn't even blink. The words, Silver Blizzard City, could make people tremble with fear. But they had seemed to be nothing in her eyes. In fact, they had no meaning whatsoever. Silver Blizzard City. Where is that? The green-clad girl gave a lovable smile. Then, she adorably tilted her head in careful consideration. After that, she assumed a very sad, apologetic, and sincerely embarrassed expression as she apologized. I'm very sorry. I've never heard of this place. Moreover, I've never heard that it's famous or anything. Xiao Han staggered. He had thought that the two women would look up in extreme reverence and admiration when he would say the words, Silver Blizzard City. In fact, he had further planned to present the proposal in his arrogance. He believed that no one would ever be able to reject a proposal from the Silver Blizzard City. However, his fantasy and imagination were entirely different from reality. The opposite party hadn't even heard of the Silver Blizzard City's name. It had seemed that Xiao Han and Xiao Fengwu had already prepared their bodies to take an aggressive and momentous stance. However, the uncle-nephew duo looked like punched-out cotton bags instead. It seemed as if their deformed cotton bodies couldn't exert themselves physically anymore. It seemed as if their wrists had been twisted. They didn't know who these men were. Moreover, they had never heard of their ancestry. In fact, they even had a sincere and apologetic expression of their faces. And Xiao Han had obviously been rendered in a very silly position as a result. However, in case Xiao Han had realized who these two women he was forcibly trying to acquire as his daughter-in-law were, it could be reckoned that he would have died from a scare even before Jun Wuyi's arrival. The Silver Blizzard City is our home. Ha ha ha, the two ladies might not know about it because they aren't Xian experts themselves. So, you may not have met many of us. Therefore, you don't know much about the world of Xian experts. Xiao Fengwu quickly pitched in with a laugh. But his tone of voice was still reeking of arrogance. It would be very rare to find an expert on the continent who hasn't heard the name of the Silver Blizzard City. The Silver Blizzard City is at the top of this Xian continent. It's so fierce, the green-clad young lady exclaimed as her delicate hand covered her mouth in shock. Silver Blizzard, is it covered in snow? Doesn't the sun melt it away? The Silver Blizzard City is only the name of the place, it's not built with ice and snow in reality. Xiao Fengwu looked dumbfounded at first. He then gave the explanation in a stumped manner. But how come we've never heard of such a famous place? The green-clad girl looked at him in a skeptical manner before she realized something. Oh, that's right. I recall the Silver Blizzard City now. The uncle-nephew duo finally drew a breath. So, you finally remember. It was bound to happen. The name of our Silver Blizzard City would obviously be known to people who don't even have Xian Qi. The then saw the green-clothed girl turn to the white-clothed young lady and say, Sister, don't you remember the time we were celebrating the New Year's in winter outside the slums? Hadn't the snow piled up at that time? I remember that you had built a wall, a rampart, and a castle out of it. And didn't you give it a name as well? In fact, you had called it the Blizzardy Silver City, right? It was winter outside. But didn't it look like a place where one could relieve themselves in a moment of rush? The white-clothed girl gave a weak smile and nodded slowly. This had been the only reaction she had given until now. The green-clad girl suddenly got up and jumped. Her tone sounded arrogant as she addressed Xiao Han and Xiao Fengwu. I think that place is still our countryside's toilet. My sister had given it the same name as that of your city. So, how is it worth such arrogance? Ha! You wear such good dresses, do you people have a lot of money? So, why do you people live in a toilet if you have so much money? Maybe it's because you've got the money, but haven't spent it yet. There's a term for that too, what is it called? Oh, right. Isn't it called parvenu riche? The corner of Xiao Han's mouth twitched. He looked angry. Xiao Fengwu was stunned on the other hand. The young master of the Xiao family couldn't think of a way to react to this situation. In fact, he couldn't help but wonder if such a great coincidence genuinely existed in that world. You're spouting nonsense, you plebeian girl. Xiao Han shouted in anger and stood up. He showed the true extent of a Sky Xian expert's imposing mannerism as he went mad. Xiao Han's mind had been losing its sensibility throughout the entire journey. And these words had managed to add more fuel to the fire. Would he genuinely attack these two feeble-looking women? He has already killed 80-90 people on this journey so far. So, is he going to add another 2 names to that list? Uncle, calm down, uncle, you must calm down. This could be a coincidence. These 2 girls are daughters of a rich household who don't know about our Silver Blizzard City. That's all. Xiao Fengwu anxiously tried to calm his uncle down. His forehead was covered with sweat. He had been smitten by that white-clothed girl's charm to the point of madness. The young man even believed that he would feel on top of the world if she even spoke a word to him. Consequently, Xiao Fengwu had lost his sense of judgment a long time ago. Get out of the way. You evil creature. Can't you see that these 2 have been trifling with us? Xiao Han threw his nephew aside in anger. What did you say? Do you have the guts to say that to me again? An extremely ice-cold and awe-inspiring voice echoed. It was devoid of any shred of humanity. It was like the cold wind that had blown straight from hell. In fact, it even left the strongest man of the Silver City's contingent to tremble. The eyes of that adorable and charming green-clad girl were no longer cheerful. Instead, they were reeking with killing intention at this time. Those mischievous eyes had suddenly turned into bottomless pits. Xiao Fengwu had only glanced at them, but he felt like he had fallen into a bottomless whirlpool. Xiao Buyu was extremely terrified by this. It's at the level of great masters. It's a great master's aura. That kind of aura had left Xiao Buyu incapable of using his own powerful aura. Who is this green-clothed girl? It didn't matter who that green-clad girl was. The matter had already gone to the dumps. The atmosphere was on the verge of a full-blown conflict. Xiao Han's words, plebeian girl, had seemingly stirred up a huge amount of trouble. Moreover, it was the kind of trouble which he was incapable of coping with. He was incapable to resolving it, and he was incapable of facing it. Coincidentally, a loud thunder-like rumbling sound arose from the distance at that moment. Flags and banners fluttered in the wind as dust rose into the sky. Jun Wuyi's army had finally arrived. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 416. Is there still room for more bad luck in this situation? Wait. Please. This is a misunderstanding. Xiao Buyu moved quickly and faced the green-clothed girl. His expression changed from that of carelessness to one of grave seriousness. He also looked bewildered. Please calm your anger, young Mississippi. This is just a misunderstanding. Please allow this rotten old man to give you an explanation. Misunderstanding. This joke isn't funny. We would have been captured by you if we were ordinary sisters from a wealthy household. You would have flagrantly insulted and devastated us if we hadn't been killed by that idiot's hand first. Do the so-called men of the Silver Blizzard City behave like this? Explain this to me. And, would you even give an explanation to someone if it weren't for us 2 sisters? Do you have an explanation for this? The green-clothed girl gave a frosty look to Xiao Buyu. And she didn't hold back her killing intention as she did this. Instead, it continued to rise. One couldn't compare Xiao Buyu to Xiao Han. The girl's killing intention continued to rise, but it wasn't as if he couldn't resist it. However, the pressure was too great. So, it was overwhelming him to some extent. However, this was an example of the ignorant are fearless. Xiao Han had been horrified when he had felt the terrifyingly imposing aura of the green-clothed girl. But His confidence had risen up once Xiao Buyu had stood up in his support. In fact, he still hadn't realized the danger that lay before him. He believed that anyone would be helpless before him as long as he had Xiao Buyu's support. However, Xiao Buyu had gotten covered in sweat as he did his best to resist that overwhelming killing intention. He felt that he was being watched by a highly venomous snake. Moreover, he felt that he couldn't compare to this serpent in any regard, whether it was in terms of speed, strength, or agility. Xiao Buyu's entire body felt cold at this moment. It was as if a cold wind had stabbed him at the back of the head. And that was because he had finally thought who this green-clothed girl could be. In fact, his derivation didn't feel much like a guess. So, he started to act like he was near one of the strongest existences in the world. Please calm down, respected Miss. Feng Wu and Han are young. They don't understand things well. They had spoken without thinking. But they didn't have any bad intentions. I must beseech you to not take offense. I apologize on their behalf. Xiao Buyu wanted to slap himself crazy as he said those words. Moreover, his intestines had started to turn green with regret. I'm a dotard. This familiar imposing aura, that familiar clothing, and that venomous glare. Only her face is different. Doesn't this mean that she's the Snake King of the Tianfa forest? However, the opposite party is unwilling to reveal their true identities, and they are traveling in secrecy. So, speaking to them about it at this time will have very bad consequences. In fact, that would be akin to committing a huge mistake. Then, there's this white-clothed girl, she's the Snake King's elder sister, and her name is Mei. Good God. Kill me now. I plan to make the Snake King's elder sister my Feng Wu's wife, or maybe even an insignificant concubine. It's like my brain had a cramp. I feel like my brain is filled with water. Even genuine idiots won't do something so idiotic. Wouldn't it be a huge joke if this goes out? She is surely the Snake King's elder sister. That's obvious from the respect she's receiving from the Snake King. I'm sure she's a bit weaker than Venerable Mei. But I can't understand how much weaker. But I'm sure that she's not too weak. Xian beasts give hierarchical status according to strength. They consider you as nothing if you don't have strength. Moreover, her family name is Mei. Can she be Venerable Mei's younger sister? It wasn't surprising that he was thinking along these lines. After all, Venerable Mei was a man in the eyes of the world. In fact, he was supposed to be an extremely old man. However, this white-clothed woman was extremely beautiful and possessed peerless style. Moreover, she had a very youthful appearance. Xiao Buyu was in no mood to even spare half a glance at Jun Wuyi's arriving army. He hadn't even heard their movements since he had turned deaf to everything else. The man was in a shock at this moment. My God! What a huge mistake did I make! I allowed my grandson to take liberties with Venerable Mei's little sister. And he even called the Snake King a plebeian girl. Xiao Buyu was on the verge of a collapse. I'm a fecking old fool. I'm having a spell of bad luck. But did it have to be so bad? Why did I let Xiao Han act so freely like an idiot? What's the difference between him doing this and courting death? Xiao Buyu couldn't help but give a stern look to Xiao Han as he thought of this. Dang it! Would we have stopped here if you hadn't gone crazy? And how could we have run into these two celestial beings if we hadn't stopped here? And how could you have tried to take liberties, or even abuse them by calling the Snake King a plebeian girl if we hadn't run into them in the first place? And how could you have made her angry if this hadn't happened? We've already established that our Xiao family has the unquenchable hatred of that extremely powerful mysterious master. And we have added these beast kings to the roster now. Venerable Mei needn't even act themselves. Those Xian beasts of Tian Fa could make the Silver Blizzard City the next Shui Han Manor. They could destroy us. You are a messenger of death. You've stirred trouble with such a terrifying woman. We had set up here so that we could wait for Jun Yi. But you had to go and stir such huge trouble. And we have now provoked the beast kings of Tian Fa because of you. Silver Blizzard City. You think you're too strong. You dared to take liberties with my elder sister. And then you cursed me, You have some guts. But you're only worthy of being called youngsters of a renowned house. The Snake King's eyes were full of cold lightning as they swept over the 17 men. She then spoke up in a cold tone. This thing isn't over yet. I will look for the Silver Blizzard City. And I will talk to that Han Feng Shui. Is this how he educates his people? Snake King's voice was becoming increasingly muffled in the backdrop of the hoofbeats of the arriving army. So, only Xiao Buyu had heard her. However, the other men of the Silver Blizzard City didn't know how big of a trouble they had provoked in this instance. However, they had seen that Xiao Buyu was talking very softly. Moreover, he was even talking about compensating and explaining matters to them. Therefore, those men had determined that these two women weren't normal and couldn't be trifled with. However, Xiao Fengwu's eyes were shining even more brightly now. He thought, wouldn't my prestige in Silver Blizzard City shoot up exponentially if this white-clothed woman hails from a powerful hidden family? There might be a big change in my marriage plans if these women belong to some powerful and secretive family. But that'll be worth. I wouldn't even mind renouncing my marriage to the little Han princess. In fact, I would also be fine living with my wife's family. This beautiful woman's company is much better than that of that unruly little girl. It had to be said that men's thoughts have no limits. Xiao Fengwu was still thinking about those things even at this moment. In fact, he was still embracing his wishful thinking and grand dreams of living with that girl's family. This had to be admired, a lot. Xiao Han's cultivation was at the initial stage of Sky Xian. But his cultivation was mostly the result of help from his elders since they had opened his meridians. And he had also been taking a lot of medication. However, very little of it was his own accomplishment through bitter hardships. He was a true Sky Xian expert. But he couldn't be compared with someone who had accumulated Xian Qi on their own and had made their breakthroughs with hard work. Even Mu Shuatong could notice that something was wrong. But Xiao Han had only been thinking about the strong support of his indestructible grandfather Xiao Buyu. Therefore, Xiao Han's sight had never been attracted to the green-clothed girl. Nor did he know what kind of trouble he had provoked. Instead, the man was only staring at the dust that was rising from the south. And his eyes were clearly showing his crazy desire to fight. You finally arrived. Jun Yi. I've been waiting for you for a while. This is when you die. Only Xiao Buyu had understood this situation. And he was struck dumb like a rock. And yet, he couldn't shout to draw attention since there was still some room for mitigation in this situation as the matter stood. However, there wouldn't be any other choice apart from a great fight if he spoke out the identity of the opposite party. Fight? Can we fight them? Our side is extremely strong. We can look down on the world with arrogance, but our own people can't hold against this opponent who is at least as strong as the cold-blooded Master Lei Wu Bei. And then, there's that mysterious Mei girl with the Snake King. It's not like we are no match for the opponent if I think about it. But would we dare to face them? Let's say that we can match them. But we will still lose in every situation. That's because we will only invite the wrath of Tianfa Forest if we beat these two girls. And the Silver City's strength won't be enough in front of their might. The Silver Blizzard City stood at the top of the world. But only 3 other parties were as fierce as the Tianfa Forest. Xiao Buyu was a peak expert of the Silver Blizzard City. He was also an elder of the Xiao family. And he was one of the strongest experts in existence. However, he was frightened and at a loss. Are these people worth dirtying your hands over? We will go and teach that Han Feng Shui a lesson for these crime. The white-clothed woman hadn't spoken till now. However, she had finally said a few words. But these few words had left Xiao Buyu and the others to pick their ears. This little sister will obey what elder sister has said. The Snake King nodded respectfully. Then, she looked at Xiao Buyu and asked in a mighty manner, "Why are you here?" "Hee. I won't conceal anything from you. Our Xiao family and the Jun family have a few grudges. My grandson had taken a vow with the desire to challenge Jun Wuyi to single battle as a man." Xiao Buyu was going to say, "Won't conceal anything from the Snake King." However, he then realized that he wouldn't wish to reveal their identities. So, he quickly corrected himself. He saw the faraway army getting increasingly closer as he surmised everything vaguely. So, his complexion became serious, and his voice became gloomy. Could he still allow Xiao Han to challenge Jun Wuyi under these circumstances? The words spoken by that white-clad young woman had provided a temporary solution to this situation. But the problem hadn't finished from the long-term perspective. In fact, the words, "We'll go and teach that Han Feng Shui a lesson for these crimes," signified that his Silver Blizzard City had incited a powerful and unequal hatred. This was like someone had shattered their heels with a powerful fart from their own buttocks. Or, someone had broken their own teeth by spewing out water from their mouth. Getting oneself into such a bad situation was nothing short of the world's top anecdote. He felt like turning his back and flying to the Silver Blizzard City so that he could convene an emergency meeting. The Snake King is an unrivaled celestial being. And that May girl's tone is even more terrifying. "We've been very unlucky. Since when did we have to show such humility? But the circumstances are strongly against us. I believe that even Han Feng Shui wouldn't have been able to prevail if he were here. So, what can I do?" Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 417. Jun Moxie's misery. However, his underlings didn't know that. They didn't know the true identity of those two women. So, they didn't understand how weak they were. Thus, they believed that they couldn't be defeated since they could rely on their leader. So, it was rather difficult to accept that this matter would greatly affect their future authority. But there wasn't anything they could do about it. However, they at least knew that there would be blood if they were to rashly provoke the other party at this moment. That's okay. But the hatred between us is near irreconcilable. However, we should leave that matter for later. Let's look at this hustle and bustle for now. I would like to see this decisive battle with Jun Wuyi as well. Can the elite of the Silver Blizzard City prevail over the Blood General? I hope I'm not disappointed in this instance. The white-clothed girl didn't even raise her eyes. It was like she was talking to thin air. The Snake King got up in an imposing manner and went beside the calmly seated white-clothed girl. She then resumed the appearance of a pretty girl from a humble family. In fact, She would have looked enchanting if it weren't for her dark and unsightly face. Xiao Buyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. These two women wished to watch that from the sides. But my heart might fail if these two watch from the sides. It was a good thing that Xiao Han didn't know the identity of those two women. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to showcase his true strength properly. Ignorance knows no fear. And this can be the root of happiness at times. The Xiao family's second elder Xiao Buyu had thought about this, and had obviously understood the meaning of that sentence. The young Master Jun's mood had been bad of late. Quite bad, in fact. He was getting closer to the Tianxiang city with every step his horse took forward. This obviously meant that he was getting closer to a huge public backlash. Jun Moxie had already prepared for that. So, even the worst-case scenario would mean nothing to him. But it still somewhat contributed to making his mood bad. The young Master Jun was very anxious. He was anxious that he would lose control over his temper, and go on a killing spree as a result. In fact, Jun Moxie had to restrain his flood of killing intention every time he'd even think about those hateful, gossip-mongers and honorable individuals. But Jun Moxie still knew that mentally preparing himself for this situation may not guard him from acting out in an unexpected manner when he'd face their combined backlash. And then there was Guanqing Han. The young Master Jun's thoughts had been piercing him. In fact, they had been pierced him like he were a sheet of paper. I've been holding back both of my lives. I haven't given in to my bodily temptations ever since I've come to this Xian continent. However, I've still been bullied by people for it. I've been called a myriad of names such as debauchee, skirt chasers, etc. However, the two of us have already formed a genuine relationship. So, these scruples shouldn't exist anymore, right? Besides, I'm willing to take responsibility for everything in this matter. So, shouldn't we at least be comfortable around each other? Therefore, he had intended to go a second round. And he had allowed his lust to reign free. And his lust had started to rage like a fiery tide within him. But Guanqing Han remained like a cold iceberg, no matter how raging an inferno he had within him. In fact, she was aloof and unfeeling towards it. In fact, he couldn't even land a single opportunity. And this was like throwing dry wood at the fires of his passion. This would do nothing to help subside it. The young Master Jun had ignored what Guanqing Han had been thinking this entire time. She would seem unmoved by him. However, he had already made a mark on her emotions. Jun Moxie made her heart thumb, and she had affections for him. In fact, Guanqing Han had formed a favorable impression of Jun Moxie a long time ago. Moreover, her status had also changed by now since Jun Wuyi had taken her in as his adopted daughter over the course of this journey. So, everyone in the camp knew about it. And a fact was a fact even if no one else knew about it. It could even be said that Jun Wuyi had approved of that matter between the two of them. However, this didn't mean that Jun Moxie and Guanqing Han could recklessly satiate their desires before they had been married off. The thing that had happened that night was a mistake. And she had been left with no choice but to make that mistake. However, she would surely become a laughingstock if she and Jun Moxie had such intimate relations while the latter was in his senses. After all, people of our society are far from the acceptance of something so bold. And this is especially true for such a sensitive time. Therefore, Guanqing Han's attitude towards Jun Moxie's advances were shy, embarrassment, apprehension. Thus, Jun Moxie was never able to cover the distance even once. Therefore, young Lady Guan had become an even colder beauty than before. She was truly a magnificent and cold beauty now. So, how could someone with Jun Moxie's intelligence not understand these matters? Well, he was like a **n man who had recently opened the gates of passion. Moreover, he was face to face with an extremely beautiful woman. And this beautiful woman was his woman. But she wouldn't even permit him to touch her. So, he was living in total abstinence. I will have to endure this since this is the case. However, that unbelievably enticing Dugu Xiao was also present in the scene. And she was ready to exploit any and all means at given any time. She was always ready to entice him so that she could get what she wanted. Thus, things were getting more and more. Therefore, the young Master Jun had been miserable, very, very miserable. One could imagine that a healthy and robust young man's blood could flow downwards 10 times a day. This would mean that his daggers would be drawn as many times. In fact, he would be on the verge of supporting the world with only one column. The young Master Jun's veins would start to pop on his forehead whenever this time would come. He would cry out and start to pant soon after. Then, he would rush out from his tent and look for a cold water puddle to plunge into. He had been at a complete loss these days. In fact, no regular man would have been able to endure this. Fortunately, it was early winter time. So, he had put on a few layers of clothes. But an indistinct bulge could still be seen from time to time. One could assume that the young Master Jun would have had to walk like a soldier with an assault rifle in case this was summertime. How could he be in a good mood under such circumstances? It had become worse over the past 3 days since his 3 uncles had taken a different direction from a fork on the road and had returned to the Dongfang family. Jun Moxie's desires had become more unrestrained since then. The reason for the 3 Dongfang brothers' departure was quite simple. Only one offspring of their sisters remained. So, they had to save it. They had to return home to give a report to their old lady since such an embarrassing event had occurred. And they also had to make preparations in case the attacks of ridicule didn't come to a stop against the Jun family. In that case, they would prefer to break the pact and dispatch strong troops. Things could still get out of hand. However, they could always bring the young Master Jun and the young Lady Guan Qinghan to the Dongfang family. Therefore, the 3 left without rest when they reached the diversion point. Jun Moxie was riding a horse at the moment. And he was following the carriage which carried Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiao. They were inside the same carriage which he had extorted for himself. However, he couldn't even sit in it now. This strict order had come directly from Jun Wuyi. In fact, Jun Wuyi had banned his nephew's presence inside that carriage. And the young Master Jun had no intentions of violating it either. However, he again whiffed a smell of that faint and beautiful fragrance coming from ahead. And the young Master Jun couldn't prevent his blood vessels from opening up. This gave rise to a reaction he wanted to avoid. The horse he was riding was calm and settled at first. But it suddenly neighed and turned its head to shoot a puzzled glance towards Jun Moxie. The horse's eyes were filled with doubts and grievance. "Master, I feel wronged since you're riding me. So, I request that you please stop poking me with that short stick. It may sound strange because beggars can't be choosers. I'm a horse. So, shouldn't you give my feelings some thought even if you're feeling hungry? There's a possibility that you may not be minding this since you're in a favorable position. But that area is also odd, after all, it's my backbone." Jun Moxie returned the horse's glance with an innocent expression. I know what you're thinking, brother horse. But that toy of mine isn't listening to my orders of late. You're such a lively and spirited horse. You must have had the same problems, right? Please understand. So, the horse understood it and turned its head forward. He then continued to move forward while bearing his troubles in silence. Jun Moxie had rested for several days after he had forged the blood of yellow flame. However, he had then discovered this new misery of his. So, he had decided that he was better off being a thief. After all, his attention and energy would remain diverted as long as he had something else on his mind. Jun Moxie tried to find an alternate solution to his problem as well. However, he failed again and again. Consequently, the thief ran rampant in the barracks again. How could he be blamed for it under these circumstances? The young Master Jun was extremely frustrated and had nowhere to vent. So, he stole everything, whether civilian or military. However, he had already informed Jun Xie about this matter. He had told his uncle that he needn't panic. He had also mentioned that they weapons are of use to him. Therefore, Jun Xie had been prepared for it. And he didn't lose his cool in front of the crisis. He trusted his nephew. So, the Supreme Commander Jun didn't differentiate between right and wrong, and opted to go with what he believed was true and just. Thus, he decided to shield the thief with care. The quartermaster came to Jun Xie one day, and he nervously reported the current status of the armory. The shivering man had been expecting a harsh punishment, or even execution. However, Jun Xie downplayed the situation and said while waving his hand, "Is this a big deal? It's just a few blades, isn't it? You're here to trouble me for such trivial things. Get out." The quartermaster had already taken a decisive decision to report the matter, and had confessed his failure in the face of it. His head had been filled with sweat. His face was full of misgivings when he had come in. However, his body had relaxed by the time he had stepped out. In fact, he thought that he was dreaming. After all, it wasn't as if he had lost 3 or 5 weapons. He had lost nearly half of the armory. This was a huge sin for the quartermaster on the watch. How did that happen? Since when did the Supreme Commander become so good to talk to? He's being so amiable. He felt overwhelmingly warm inside. Therefore, the young Master Jun started to forge weapons every evening. However, he didn't exert the same effort he had in the previous instance. He only used 100 swords or so to forge 1 weapons this time. He forged around 9 of those weapons before he lost interest. "I'm not a fecking blacksmith. I'm only forging these weapons to kill time. It's not important to do this over and over again. There isn't any meaning to this. This is very boring. Ah, these swords are enough anyway. 1 for third uncle, 1 for grandfather, 1 for Hai Chen Feng, 1 for Bailey Luo Yun, and then 1 for old Pang. There is no one else who has enough strength to use one of these weapons. So, there's no point in giving 1 to them. Therefore, 9 swords are enough." There was one transformation in Jun Moxie that had become very obvious. His murderous aura had become colder ever since he had developed a better understanding and sense of familiarity with the blood of yellow flame. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 418. A suspicion of 10 years. His glare had become increasingly cold. The incorporeal murderous spirit was continuously being recycled throughout his body. It would reverse inwards, and then it would come out in a volatile manner. However, it would go back inside after some time. It was like the rising sea when it was volatile. In fact, it was like a rising sea of converging swords, and could seemingly destroy the clear blue skies above. But it was quiet when it went back in. And it would seem that it was a calm ripple which wouldn't rise up in 1,000 years. Whether it was volatile or receding, the current Jun Moxie and the one he would to be in the Tianxiang city were completely different personalities. In fact, they couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. The young Master Jun was extremely fidgety and dizzy at this time. He also felt that his posterior and inner thighs were getting scratched. However, his pike still stood tall and unafraid. It didn't seem willing to surrender in any way. And no amount of effort could help in bringing it down. That was because Dugu Xiao was riding at his side. That girl wasn't sitting inside the carriage. She had demanded for a pony to ride on. She had then decided to ride smugly at the young master's side. And she had been chattering and giggling the entire journey. In fact, she would often jump onto the back of Jun Moxie's horse with a whooshing sound, and would then sit behind him. She would then grasp his waist with a content expression. And she would pay no attention to the onlooker's gaze while doing so. Therefore, the officers and men had also gotten used to it as time had passed. After all, that pretty little girl made many of the younger troops happy by being a visual treat. And her long-lasting fragrance was also enjoyed by everyone. For example, Dugu Xiao was speaking with Jun Moxie in high spirits at this time. She then started to choke with panic in the face of the northern wind. After that, she suddenly jumped over to him with a very loud pop, pop sound. However, she hadn't jumped on the horse's back this time. Rather, she had jumped into the young Master Jun's arms. It would be correct to say that she had landed on the horse's neck. Then, she lowered her posterior and extended her arms to embrace Jun Moxie's neck. This entire thing happened very suddenly. So, Jun Moxie wasn't left with many options. He extended his arms and embraced Dugu Xiao with vigor so that she didn't fall down. This was because some things could be reacted to with instinct rather than being conveyed in words. What happened next wasn't unexpected. Jun Moxie gave a repressed groan. His face changed color as he bared his teeth. He was going through pain and a bit of enjoyment at this moment. Dugu Xiao cried out, "Ah," as her arms circled around Jun Moxie's neck. Her posterior had barely touched down when she turned pale. Then, it immediately shot up again. She couldn't help reach out to feel that protrusion next to her buttocks. She then rebuked, "What is this hard thing? It's pressing me so painfully. I will die of pain. Brother Moxie, you've got to pull your weapon away." Puff. Puff. The surrounding soldiers whimpered and laughed as they heard this. They obviously knew what was pressing painfully against Dugu Xiao. That's a good and incisive weapon. Each one of them was swaying from side to side. What is this? Withdraw it quickly. Dugu Xiao tried to act quickly and exerted herself as she pulled on it. SSSS. Jun Moxie hissed with pain and pleasure. Then, he hurriedly removed her hand from the weapon she had grabbed. Stop messing with it. How can you mess with it? Why? Never mind. I'll just sit like this. Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes had turned into big circles as she tried to get up. She then hovered her body a bit above Jun Moxie's since she wanted to avoid that thing. However, that didn't help her case since that thing was unwaveringly strong and upright. In fact, she couldn't avoid it no matter how hard she tried. Dugu Xiao didn't like this feeling. So, she turned her buttocks around. What is that thing? It's so warm as well. Hey! The accumulated lust inside Jun Moxie was ready to burst out. In fact, it could ignite and burn the very heavens. He nearly pressed hard upon the naive little girl, and committed the deed then and there. But he eventually controlled himself, and picked the little girl's delicate body and placed her behind him. The soldiers besides them winked at each other in joy. Dugu Xiao held Jun Moxie's waist from behind. She buried her small face even deeper into his back, and sighed with satisfaction. She then sniffed with her small nose and said, "You have a very good smell. It smells like Little White." But these words reminded her of her grievance, and she started to weep. "I don't know where Little White is. I don't know, boo-hoo." A dark line appeared on Jun Moxie's face. Little White? Would he have advanced like that if I hadn't helped him? You should have said that he smells like me. Wait, this is wrong. Crap. I'm a big man. How can I be compared to such a little beast? He felt a divine feeling as he enjoyed the sensation of her fragrant and soft body sticking to his back. She would stick her red lips to his ears as she'd speak. And he could clearly hear the words from those sweet lips. Even her soft hair would sometimes touch the sides of his face and mouth in a teasing manner. His nostrils wouldn't be able to help but take in a whiff of their fragrant smell. Jun Moxie couldn't help but feel some waves rippling in his heart. It was no doubt that his luck with women was wondrous. However, it also entailed misery and suffering. Jun Moxie had opened the gates that had led him to the world of passion very recently. Therefore, something like this would only simulate his blood vessels into opening wider. And this meant that it would become hard for him to control himself. Therefore, he could only help himself by wearing additional layers of clothing to the front of his body. He couldn't endure any more at this time. However, they suddenly heard a loud voice from the front. "Jun Xie. Come out if you're a man, and fight me to the death." That voice moved like the thunder in the sky. It was a mix of craziness and extreme hatred. Everyone in the 20,000-strong army could hear it. It was Silver Blizzard City's Xiao Han's voice. This change had been very sudden. The troops who carried the banners at the front came to a stop. The thousands of troops and horses didn't utter a sound. They repressed their emotions and remained quiet. They would have toppled any mountains and crossed any seas if they were given the order. Anyone who'd speak rudely would have been turned into minced meat, even if he was a Sky Xian expert. There was an ocean of soldiers in this army. So, one would replace the other until they had trampled upon the enemy. Jun Moxie's expression changed, and his glare became cold. He kicked his horse. It took a step forward and suddenly picked speed. Dugu Xiao screamed in fear behind him. She then looked up as she tightly held on to Jun Moxie's clothes. The men from the Silver Blizzard City had sensed the imposing aura of that green-clothed girl. It was unlike any regular person, and exceeded everyone else. But then, she had retracted her claws once the white-clothed girl had intervened and resolved the conflict. Therefore, everyone was at ease at this time. Moreover, Jun Xie had been their intended target in any case. So, they would be wronged if they carelessly started to fight with some other great expert instead. It wouldn't have mattered whether they would have won or lost. It would have been unnecessary to pick that fight. Everyone had relaxed. However, they had begun to curse Xiao Han and his nephew. "You donghua lecherous idiots. You should know who you can provoke. Are you capable enough of provoking these two women? These two guys are very reckless. The idiocy of these two dimwits needs to be dealt with later on. They've potentially implicated everyone with this one stupid act of theirs. Today's happenings are very worrying. However, the problem had been averted for the time being. So, everyone's minds turned to the upcoming challenge that Xiao Han would deliver to Jun Xie. It was strange to say this, but all of them had previously been hoping to witness Xiao Han teach Jun Xie a good lesson. However, everyone had suddenly changed their minds. And all of them wanted Xiao Han to be beaten by Jun Xie now. I hope he gets a proper beating. It's fine as long as he doesn't die. The green-clothed girl may not seek out our people to cause more trouble if Xiao Han gets beaten into a miserable condition after having provoked her, right? Xiao Han stood holding his weapon. His clothes were like snow, and his sword was like silver. He seemed to have some traces of elegance to him. But his twisted expression had destroyed that image. The army halted in a proper order. After that, a slow reply came. Xiao Han. Jun Xie was the one who had spoken back. The vanguard of the army parted as Jun Moxie slowly pushed his uncle's wheelchair to the front. The eyes of Jun Xie's tranquil face were filled with hot fire. Xiao Han. It's good that you are here to look for me since I was looking for you as well. So, let's settle our debts since you've come knocking at my door. You're looking for me because of your hatred for me for taking away your wife. But I've also been looking for you to settle old debts. Ours is an enmity that can't be reconciled. For my eldest and second brothers. For my two nephews. And for Xiao. Jun Moxie was also going berserk with anger. In fact, he was very sullen and fierce. Feck. You Silver Blizzard City people had to show up at such an important juncture? That's good. This young master will loosen your muscles and bones. Our situation is destined to have only one end. So, I will help you attain death if you wish for it. In fact, I believe that using my flame of primal chaos would be a complete waste on you guys. The anger of this uncle-nephew duo soared. Their accumulated anger was making them feel like going berserk. They wanted to wreak havoc through the heavens. There was a mountainous pressure around them. Jun Xie. Do you dare to fight me like a man today? Xiao Han's expression was twisted. Don't hide behind your thousands of soldiers and refuse me. What's the use of hiding behind other experts? Fight me for Xiao. For Xiao. Jun Xie repeated that word in a low voice. Then, he raised his head in a flash of understanding, and a sharp light flashed across his eyes. Xiao Han. What, hiding behind thousands of soldiers? What, hiding behind other experts? You used to be bold in those days, right? You used to move freely within the thousands of soldiers, right? Are you scared to attack my army today? What happened to your courage? What happened to your strength? Have you grown inferior in these 10 years? Jun Xie's words had seemed sinister and taunting in nature. But these words went far back and deep to a huge issue that had been plaguing Jun Xie's mind. How did that tragedy occur with my elder brothers and nephews all those years ago? This matter had been bothering Jun Xie for 10 years. It had also left him to suspect everyone for 10 years. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 419. It's a good sword. It's a cheap. It was important to know that the tents of an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers would spread out over a distance of over 5 kilometers if they were to pitch camp. And the Supreme Commander's tent would be in the middle. It wouldn't be easy to even infiltrate into a 5-kilometer-long army camp. One could only imagine how difficult it would be to achieve this feat if they had to fight the camp's soldiers en route. It's true that one could only have to infiltrate the camp halfway to reach the Supreme Commander's tent. However, what kind of strength would be needed to achieve such a feat? Even a strong senior expert couldn't fly along a 5-kilometer-long camp without pausing for breath. And they would be hemmed in by the soldiers if they paused for breath. So, they wouldn't be able to get out of that encirclement for a while. Thus, they would be left panting by the time they'd reach the Supreme Commander's tent. This infiltrator would have wasted a lot of energy in this process as well. However, the Supreme Commander's tent could be promptly shifted if the opposite party created a disturbance. Perhaps the solitary falcon could attempt to assassinate Jun Xie amongst his 20,000 soldiers. However, he too would surely find it a difficult task to accomplish. Only the young Master Jun could bring back the severed head of the Supreme Commander from within his thousands of soldiers. And this was because he could rely upon the amazing yin-yang escape technique. However, Jun Xie clearly knew that the individual who stood opposing was only a Sky Xian expert. Moreover, this individual hadn't appeared out of the blue like an assassin. Therefore, he didn't need to fear an attack he wouldn't be able to prepare for. Moreover, there was a very strict guard around the Supreme Commander. It could be reckoned that even a mosquito wouldn't be able to fly in on their watch. So, how could someone succeed in storming in? In fact, it would be impossible to kill Jun Xie unless there was a traitor in his army's ranks. However, who could have this traitor been? That is, if one existed in the first place. And where are these traitors now? Jun Xie had always had these suspicions. In fact, he had been suspicious about someone particular. But the target of his suspicion was someone important. In fact, that person's influence could create huge problems if Jun Xie acted recklessly. So, Jun Xie needed to confirm those suspicions first. Thus, he needed concrete proof for it. This was the major difference between Jun Moxie and Jun Xie. Jun Xie was a genuine talent of the Jun family's later generation. In fact, he and Jun Xie were very similar in this regard. They could even give up their hatred for the country, the people, and the family. They could at least delay their revenge if needed. However, Jun Moxie would move into action then and there if the same thing had happened with him. He would have investigated anyone he was suspicious about. In fact, he would even torture and threaten them. I will argue with my fists no matter how big and strong your backing is. And I will destroy your whole family if you even hurt a single finger of mine. I won't bother if many innocents die because of the storm this matter creates. I will only blame the person who caused this trouble. How can the victim's family blame me for it? Ha ha. Are you confused, Jun Xie? Is scratching your head over this matter making you depressed? Xiao Han had a maddened grin on his face. Let me tell you that I know the inside story. But I won't tell you. I will never do it. You can go to hell with this question of yours. Ha ha ha. So, my guess was right. There existed another inside story to this matter. I will fight out since you've challenged me. First you, and then your Silver Blizzard City. Not for anything else, but for my 2 elder brothers. Jun Xie's eyes were full of murderous intention. A light of anguish flashed deep inside his eyes. His heart was hurting at this time. Eldest brother. Second brother. Forgive me for taking so long to erase the disgrace of your death. Jun Xie's glare became sharp. He reached out with his hand and said, "Give me my sword." Jun Moxie was already prepared for this. He twisted his wrist. and a sword appeared in his hand with a green light. Then, he handed it to his uncle. Jun Xie reached out and took it. However, the sword's weight was unexpectedly higher than he had imagined. Even someone at the Sky Xian middle rank wouldn't have been able to catch it if they were careless. His wrists got bent, and the sword started to sink downwards. However, he moved his Xian power and stopped the sword's fall. That sword was average in terms of its looks, but its weight was over 3 times that of a normal sword. Moreover, this sword wasn't even the second best sword that Jun Moxie had forged. In fact, Jun Moxie had forged this sword only moments ago in an urgent manner. And he had only used 15 swords to forge this one. Jun Xie could have been able to handle a sword that had been forged using hundreds of swords. However, the weight of the sword would have been 10 times heavier than a normal one. So, he wouldn't have been able to use it to fight freely. Thus, the third master would have needed some practice time with that weapon if he wished to use it in an effective fight against the enemy. It would have been counterproductive to give him such a sword. Therefore, Jun Moxie had quickly forged this sword while they were walking to the front. It was only thrice the normal weight of a sword. But a man of Jun Xie's strength could become efficient at using it very quickly. This hastily forged sword's quality couldn't be compared to the one Jun Moxie had forged earlier. But it was still a divine weapon-ranked sword when compared to regular swords. Jun Xie looked at his nephew in astonishment. His nephew returned his glance with a faint smile, but didn't say a word. The Supreme Commander waved his sword. The sword started to move downwards in a gloomy manner. But a strange blue light was emitted from the sword as it moved. This light was very similar to the color of lightning. And it painted a slash in the air as it moved downwards. It's a good sword. It's a very good sword. Jun Xie blurted out loudly. Xiao Buyu's expression had also become heavy on the opposite side. This sword is clearly a divine weapon. Elder sister, I think that this sword is a little strange. Moreover, this sword's light and texture aren't very different from the one that Lei Wubei had used. The Snake King had arrived beside the white-clothed girl's ear when she had spoken that in a soft tone. But the latter didn't even react to what was spoken. The Snake King couldn't help but find it strange. At first, she thought that the white-clad girl was also attracted to that sword. But then, she raised her head and saw that her sister was staring unblinking at another direction. Green Hunter followed that gaze and saw a smart young man. He was standing tall and straight. He looked handsome, and his eyes were flickering. He stood amongst an army of thousands, but he still appeared solitary. It seemed as if he was the only one in the entire world. This one glance at him was enough to give rise to a bitter and lonely feeling in Green Hunter's heart. In fact, this feeling had arisen from the very depths of her heart. She felt that this youngster had always felt loneliness, boundless loneliness. And she couldn't help but be hurt at perceiving this feeling. Jun Moxie. Snake King still remembered this youngster. However, she couldn't understand why her sister was staring at that youngster without blinking. That youngster is indeed quite talented for a human. He possesses such a great cultivation at such a young age. But he still isn't in the league of our Tien Fa's Beast Kings. So, Green Hunter retracted her gaze in bafflement. And she saw that her sister's hand was still clasping the teacup as if nothing had happened. However, her knuckles had turned white. Her expression had also changed, and it looked like she was about to burst forth. Why? She could see that the teacup in her sister's hand still looked intact. In fact, it still seemed to be full of tea. But the Snake King's discerning eyes could tell that the teacup had already changed into dust. It was only being kept in shape by her sister's supreme Xian efficacy. And its true form would be revealed if her Xian efficacy were removed. Then it would turn into flying dust. Elder sister has never been so angry. She wouldn't have behaved so strangely even if she saw a most hated enemy of hers. So, why now? It was a pity that there wasn't enough time for Green Hunter to ponder more over this matter. And that was because the two individuals had started to mobilize their strengths in the field. Jun Xie had exclaimed, "It's a good sword. It's a very good sword." However, Xiao Han's face had turned red when he had heard this. That's because he had somehow managed to mishear those words as, "It's a cheapo. It's a cheapo." Xiao Han appeared to be seething in anger. The people of the Silver Blizzard City had often passed this comment behind his back. They had often considered him to be a cheap person. Even the elders of his own family had often felt that he had failed to meet their expectation. In fact, they had often looked at him and wondered, "How can you be so cheap? That woman doesn't love you. She never harbored a good impression of you. She loved someone else. And you tried to kill that man? What are you doing?" Those two were happy with each other. And this woman is the daughter of the Lord of the city. Do you genuinely believe that a betrothal of children is binding upon them when they mature? However, you still took revenge against his family and didn't let up in the matter. Are you genuinely that reluctant to lose the title of the Lord's son-in-law? Then, you think that they are cheap people. Who can be called cheap if not you? How can you be so cheap? Xiao Han. Why are you so cheap? I'm cheap. I'm fecking cheap. Xiao Han's eyes became red. A bright snow-white sword light flashed. However, Jun Xie had barely gotten out of his wheelchair by this time. In fact, he was still getting into a fighting position. He had stood up. But he hadn't readied himself for the fight. However, Xiao Han had still moved into action. Wasn't such behavior and character cheap? In fact, any man would find it very hard to find a better adjective. Jun Xie understood his opponent's character very well. So, he was already prepared for something like this. Therefore, he quickly lifted his sword, and the two swords clashed with a clang. The wheelchair flew back like an arrow under the pressure of the two swords' violent clash. Jun Xie's body had also been swept away. His black clothes fluttered as he was sent flying 15 meters. Then, he jabbed his sword in the ground and leveraged it to support his body as he turned around. Jun Xie dropped down and sat on the ground. He looked at Xiao Han and said, "You came here to fight. So, you mustn't worry about injuries." Xiao Han felt a burst of regret. His wrists hurt from the impact of their swords' collision. Moreover, his sword had also been nicked badly. It was important to know that Xiao Han had carried that sword for over 20 years. It had been made using Xian jade. It had been carried by several generations of the Xiao family's members. And it was inherited by each member from his elders when they came of age. His sword complemented the Silver City's Xian techniques. And this combination formed a cold and sharp qi. Moreover, this sword was very sharp and differently textured. In fact, these qualities made it a world-class weapon. Xiao Han's sword had made the ones used by his opponents feel cheap in past encounters. In fact, there had been times when opponents with a slightly stronger Xian strength had fallen into a huge disadvantage due to the power of his sword. But Xiao Han had unexpectedly suffered this reversal of fate in this instance. And his sword had also been damaged in that clash. However, Jun Wuyi's long sword still looked fine. It hadn't incurred the slightest of damage. Don't tell me the sword in his hand is one of the rare treasures of the world. Then, he was suddenly struck by a realization. That sword is one aspect. But I can feel that Jun Wuyi's Xian efficacy is very profound. In fact, it's even better than my own. How is this possible? In fact, it would be hard to get the upper hand if I use my Sky Xian strength and my divine weapon. However, Xiao Han's confidence soared once again when he saw Jun Wuyi sitting on the ground. He then thought, so what if your Xian Qi is stronger? You're still a cripple. Can't I even beat a cripple? The corners of Xiao Han's mouth twisted and formed a cruel curve. He shouted in an elated manner. Then, he turned into a bright light along with his sword. After that, he dashed forward to pierce Jun Wuyi. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 420. It's not true. The sword burst into a bright light of a silvery shower as it reached midway. It then transformed into a bright arc and exploded with a bang. It resembled fireworks as it did so. Then, the brightly glittering sword started to revolve around Jun Wuyi's body. This trick of Xiao Han's could be called a flashy trick. It would harass the enemy and dazzle them. Then, it would attack the enemy in a manner which couldn't be defended against. This was a circling attack if things were to be explained in a simpler manner. So, each strike would fall from behind at Jun Wuyi's body. Bluntly put, this attack could easily bully a crippled man. His actions were utterly shameless. In fact, they were cheap beyond any known equal. Xiao Han's trick play had clearly proved his character's make. Xiao Han's attack was surely very shameless in its make. However, Jun Wuyi's situation had become dire because of Xiao Han. In fact, he was in grave danger. No one could bear to watch as Xiao Han used that trick. And the 7 swords of the Silver Blizzard City were also included in the list of these people. What's going on? His legs aren't working. Isn't it obvious that he can't move about? Is this how you save your honor? Is this how the Silver City works? The one who spoke up was the 3rd sword of the 7 swords. He was frowning, and his expression was one of disgust. Jun Wuyi's legs are crippled. He is crippled, but he's not useless. He spent 10 years focusing on his Xian Qi. So, it isn't very surprising that he's at the middle rank of the Sky Xian level. And that is already superior to that of Xiao Han's. Moreover, his sword is far better than Xiao Han's Xian Jade sword. Xiao Han's way of dealing with matters isn't that great. However, it still gets him the greatest advantage if you compare the two sides. You think that he should stop doing what benefits him the most? Isn't that courting death? The 6th elder said coldly. One is allowed to commit any sort of crimes while fighting to the death against a mortal enemy. Where does the question of honor arise in it? Xiao Han's methods were lowly and cheap. But the 2 men were fighting to the death at the end of the day. Moreover, the fight was full of splendor and brilliance. So, it didn't matter whether it was the people from the Silver Blizzard City or the men from Tian Xiang's army, all of them were paying full attention to the fight. In fact, there were barely any exceptions. There were only a very few exceptions. However, that didn't mean that there were no exceptions at all. For example, one such exception was the Silver City's Han Yenmeng. She was pouting as she leaned against Mu Shuetong. Her expression was one of grievance. and she lacked the interest to even cast a single glance at the ongoing fight. Mu Shuatong was stone-faced on the other hand. He was worried about Jun Wuyi. He looked towards his side at Han Yangmeng and whispered in her ear, "Why do you feel wronged, little girl? Isn't this a great opportunity if you're against this marriage? Foolish little girl." Han Yangmeng's delicate body trembled. Her eyes and her small face shone as she exclaimed, "Wow, haha!" She suddenly laughed and jumped onto Mu Shuatong's arms. Then, she started to sway with unspeakable excitement. Jun Wuyi had been facing inconvenience due to his body's disability. And Xiao Han wasn't the kind of man who would spare him after getting the advantage. Therefore, he had set up an overwhelming superiority for himself by now. In fact, the third Master Jun would have died a long time ago if it weren't for his superior Xian efficacy and his fearsome divine weapon. However, only the final conclusion determines whether an advantage is turned into a victory or not. The men of the Silver City looked on as the arrogant Xiao Han continued to dominate the battle. However, their expressions seemed very complex. In fact, one couldn't even tell whether they were excited, or disappointed, or happy or sad. The white-clothed girl finally moved her eyes from Jun Moxie and looked at the fight. She glanced once. She only shot a single glance. Then, she sighed. That Silver Blizzard City's Xiao Han is done for. The Snake King frowned and said, "I also think that this fight is somewhat strange. But I can't put my finger on what's making it seem that way. I believe that Jun Wuyi is stronger than Xiao Han. But his legs." The white-clad girl stated in a low voice, "Jun Wuyi's legs are fine. He's pretending to be a cripple. He has deliberately created the disadvantages that we see before us. Jun Wuyi surely wins when it comes to Xian cultivation and strength of weapon. But he has been a cripple for many years. Therefore, he's still quite unfamiliar and unpracticed with his martial skill. And that Silver City's man's martial skill is quite good. So, it outpaces Jun Wuyi's by far. This is one area where Jun Wuyi has a disadvantage against Xiao Han. However, it's not difficult for him to win. He only needs to shoot down the enemy's sword with his powerful skill. That can be enough to determine the difference between victory and defeat. But Jun Wuyi seems more interested in killing his opponent. The difference in strength isn't much between the two. And Jun Wuyi can't strike and kill Xiao Han while the others from the Silver City watch, since they are bound to stop that from happening. Therefore, he has arranged this situation. He's making his opponent exhaust his Xian Qi as much as possible. Moreover, he's also creating a chance to kill him with one strike. And Xiao Han won't be able to survive if Jun Wuyi gets that chance. Moreover, no one will be able to stop him either. I see. The Snake King finally caught on. An air-rendering sound echoed as a sword screeched through the air. Xiao Han's hair fluttered in the wind in a crazed manner. His expression was that of cruel pleasure. His skills and strength had reached their peak after this warm-up. His entire life's skill was in that sword strike along with everything else. This was his killer move. The merciless blizzard sword. The temperature of that area suddenly decreased. It felt as if a cold wind from midwinter had started to screech about. You're toast, Jun Wuyi. How does it matter that your Xian Qi is greater than mine? You're still a cripple. A cripple. And you will die a cripple now. Ha ha ha. Xiao Han seemed like a maniac as he laughed. Flowery and hexagonal snowflakes suddenly appeared in the sky along with Xiao Han's laughter. And They shone brightly as they floated down in a dreamy manner. Then, they got filled with crazy sword light in a split second. This attack seemed full of murderous intention as it frantically moved towards the spot where Jun Xie was sitting on the ground. Jun Xie was on the ground. So, he couldn't evade even if he wanted to. Xiao Buyu sighed. His heart hesitated. Should I go forth and stop this? Or should I let things continue? However, the solitary falcon and Jun Moxie suddenly smiled in a strange manner as they watched this happen from afar. This was a kind of a sneering smile, and one of elation. But everyone else was focusing on the fight between those two men. Therefore, they hadn't noticed this. Xiao Han's mind was brimming with murderous hatred and joy at that moment. I have finally achieved my dream of many years. I have finally washed away my disgrace with his blood. You were always unwavering, right? Yao? Well, your lover has died by my sword today. If I can't have you, then no one else can either. Xiao Han's face seemed twisted as he moved his sword crazily and sent it flying like an arrow at Jun Xie with the entirety of his strength. It seemed that Jun Xie couldn't do anything anymore. His sword circled above his head, but was sent flying by the impact with a screeching sound. However, Xiao Han didn't relax despite this positive development. Instead, he continued to laugh as he shot his sword forward. Suddenly, a smile appeared on Jun Xie's calm and collected face. His smile was one of contentment and pride. In fact, he even winked at Xiao Han. Everyone else was left to wonder why the blood general would make such a gesture. And then, almost everyone suddenly cried out in shock. It wasn't because of the blood general's expression. Instead, it was because the scene that had unfolded in front of them was too strange and unbelievable. Because, at that moment, Jun Xie had suddenly jumped and stood up. He even seemed to have walked with vitality. After that, Jun Xie made a single and simple move as Xiao Han's powerful sword came overhead. He ferociously kicked Xiao Han's abdomen. Xiao Han had made his move in the anticipation of the effects of the poison. In fact, he had focused his entire energy on Jun Xie's upper body. In fact, he hadn't even thought about his opponent's lower body. How could a man whose legs had been crippled ever use them to attack back? Only a fool would think about that. Xiao Han had become even more relieved once Jun Xie had lost his sword. Therefore, he was prepared for his opponent's upper body to be cut under the influence of his final attack. In fact, he had assumed the attitude of someone who was about to win, and his mind was full of thoughts about the ways he would torture his opponent. You have always been under my foot, Jun Xie. Just like before. It doesn't matter what method I use, it's all my skill. I can insult you wantonly as long as I win. I can trifle with you to my heart's content. I can wreak havoc upon you. However, Xiao Han could have never imagined that his crippled opponent could kick him. And so hard at that. How did Jun Xie kick me? Isn't he a cripple? How can a man whose legs have been crippled kick? How did he kick me? That kick was powerful, very powerful. Xiao Han's body flew with that kick. In fact, he had gone flying out like a kite with its string cut. His sword light didn't do any better than he did. And it was sent flying in disarray as well. Moreover, Xiao Han's mouth and nose had also started to stream with blood. However, his eyes were still full of disbelief. Even his mouth was opened wide and hadn't closed. How is this possible? Wasn't he crippled for the last 10 years? So, how can he kick me? How? Never had such a conflicting feeling of anger and amazement come out so freely from Xiao Han's psyche as they had in this moment while he was falling. Jun Wuyi didn't let up. His body shot like an arrow to keep up with Xiao Han even though he had been kicked to fly backwards. He kicked his enemy firmly on his chest again. Xiao Han screamed in pain as a result. His eyes reflected the chaos and confusion of his mind, confusion as a rib cracked. Meanwhile, that rare sword from the Silver City had flown out, and no one knew where it had disappeared to. However, Jun Wuyi didn't give him enough time to think about it. The third Master Jun's fists were clenched as they resolutely smashed against Xiao Han's temples. Jun Wuyi's eyes became red as his fists came into contact with Xiao Han's face and felt his facial temperature. Is this the elated feeling one gets from squishing their enemy's flesh when they take their revenge? 10 years of animosity. 10 years of hatred. 10 years of separation. 10 years of sullen grief. 10 years of regret. 10 years of deformity. Arg! Jun Wuyi screamed madly as he faced upwards. He punched like a madman as his mighty face got covered with guilt-ridden tears. Eldest brother. Sister-in-law. I will take revenge for you. Second brother. You little brother hasn't forgotten you. Can you see this? Little nephews? Can you see this? Yao. My Yao. The lowly man who had been the reason for all those crimes was before him. Jun Wuyi was screaming noiselessly. Tears continued to gush out as he resolutely continued to strike Xiao Han's abdomen. He could only hear the crack and bang of his hits, and the sound of escaping air as Xiao Han's dantian broke with an explosion. Xiao Han's body flew out with a whoosh. However, he was unable to feel any pain at this moment. His eyes were full of fear and disbelief as he opened them wide in shock. He continued to call out, "Impossible! Absolutely impossible! How can this be possible? It's not true! It's not true!" However, Jun Wuyi still didn't let him breath, and got close to him in an instant. There was a bang and a slam as he fiercely hit his enemy's flesh to swirls. This story will be continued to chapter 421. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.